Now, there's a part of my writing that always is like, oh gosh, being queer is a lot. But there's also a lot of beautiful things about it too. A lot of time that it takes, I think, for queer folks, gender diverse folks, to find the joy after growing up in a system that wasn't designed for us, especially when we're living at the intersections of being brown, being children of immigrants, right? Like being queer and all these other things that folks are still finding language for today. So I also tend to write a lot about Filipino mythology. So I have found mythology as such a great way to look at oral histories that were taught in our communities, right? That maybe a lot of us in the US weren't told. My lolo was somebody who, growing up, he would say that he could see the manananggals like flying above their house in the Philippines, and I'm like, ooh, I don't know if you're being real or if you're just messing with me, but I'll take your word that I should be afraid of something. But I grew up with that, right? Like my mom's side of the family were very much into storytellers and storytelling and the mythical origins of everything, and they're very superstitious, but I also find it in a way where I'm like, it's really beautiful that you really believe in a lot of like energies in the world. And so when I first learned of this story, anybody heard of the myth Si Malakas at Si Maganda? Anybody? Yeah, I hear some mm-hms. The first time I learned about it was my first year after graduating from undergrad. I was shook. I was at like a Filipinx Awareness Week event when I was still advising for a Filipino org back in San Diego. And there was a storytelling workshop, and somebody did a whole thing about the first man and the first woman, malakas, strength, and maganda, beauty. And so ever since then, I think it took me a few years, as poems sometimes do, to write a poem that was my takeaway from hearing our creation story, one of our pre-colonial creation stories about the first people in the world. So this is an honor to that, to learning this story when I was much older in postgrad. Si Malakas at Si Maganda. According to pre-colonial Filipinx creation myth from the Tagalog people, Maganda, the first woman, translates to beauty. Malakas, the first man, translates to strength. After a seabird struck a piece of bamboo floating in the ocean with its beak, the two splintered from the wood and they were born as the first humans. The story goes, the pair lived on an island. The pair bore hundreds of children, and their Maganda mother taught them to find beauty in all things alive, from the fish tickling their toes, to the fireflies twinkling above the waves, to the fluidity of all the world's wondrous, weird, and queer energy in every embrace. And so the children played and laughed and danced and played and laughed and danced until one day, the island was full of children everywhere. Their exaltations too much for their Malakas father to bear. He was angered by their never-ending noise of their delight, for he taught them that strength does not frolic. It only takes on that which makes it stronger. That strength is measured by our ability to take the heat without burning. To be gay and jolly is not to be Malakas. And so he beat them and beat them and beat them to teach them to be tough. And they fled from him and ran to the mountains and hid in the jungle and swam away from the island. And in their plight, they left behind their beautiful mother, Maganda, and they settled in the corners of the world. And so we are all descended from the unity of beauty and strength and violence in my creation. I think of the times I have fled from men, from my fathers, from abuse. I think of the magandang babae, the beautiful women who have taught me to stand my ground, to move from what will not serve me so that I can show up authentically somewhere else, where I too can play and dance and laugh and be celebrated in all my brown joy. I think of my legacy as a man, of whether I still call myself one, of the lessons I have learned of masculinity, of how bamboo turned to belts, turned to lashes, serves to teach boys obedience, to teach boys respect. A man's oral traditions tell me that I am to stride in my virility. I am to beat out the femme. I am to command by force. As I begin to conceive my own mythologies of manhood, I have wanted to tattoo the emergence of Maganda on my body the moment she came out from the bamboo, as a reminder that we are the parts of a story we choose to tell. I, raised to be a man who was raised by women, am at the mercy of the memory of the hauntings from whom I have descended, from the machismo and the effeminate, from beyond the binary, that I should shimmer in all my queerness, that I would be so worthy worthy to be reminded that there is strength and tenderness in reclaiming our own beauty. Thank you so much. Thank you. Happy anniversary to Sunday Jump.